There are 5 questions you must never answer. The danger is in how harmless they seem. They arrive softly. They sound warm and casual. They sound like trust. That is why they work. The most effective traps rarely look like traps. They look like conversation. No threat, no pressure, no raised voice. Just one simple question, asked at the right time, in the right tone, and answered too quickly. That is how power leaves most people. Not in a fight, not in a betrayal. In a moment that felt too small to matter until the pattern was built. This is not about treating every person like an enemy. It is not about becoming paranoid, cold, or impossible to reach. It is about protection. It is about learning that not every question deserves immediate access to your truth. From childhood, most people are trained to answer when asked. A teacher asks, you answer. A parent asks, you answer. Authority asks, you comply. That training creates obedience long before it creates judgment. It teaches speed before discernment, politeness before boundaries, and response before reflection. But power begins the moment you realize a question can be polite and still invasive. Your power lives in the pause between the question and your answer. That pause is where choice survives. That pause is where pressure loses its advantage. There are 5 questions that appear again and again in ordinary life, questions most people answer on reflex and regret later. The 5th is the deepest one. It is the root. It gives the other 4 their force. But the first question appears so often that most people never notice what it is doing. You have heard it many times. Usually after a decision has been made, after your time has been used, after your boundary has been crossed. Then the person turns toward you and asks, you don't mind, do you? On the surface, it sounds respectful. It sounds like they are checking with you. It sounds like your opinion matters. But that is not permission. It is a completed decision disguised as a question. The action is done. The outcome is moving. The only thing left is your signature. That is why the trap works. If you object, you look difficult. If you say you are not comfortable, you seem dramatic, petty, or inconvenient. Social pressure does the rest. Most people would rather swallow discomfort than pay the cost of looking unpleasant. So they say, it's fine. They say, no problem. They say, I guess that's okay. With one small sentence, they teach them exactly how to handle them next time. Think about how often this happens. Someone commits your weekend before asking if you are free. A coworker shares your work, your idea, or your effort, then says it helped the whole team anyway. A friend tells a story about you, then asks if you mind after everyone has already heard it. Someone changes the plan, the timing, or your role in something that affects you, then asks for approval only after there is no easy way back. They do not ask before. They ask after. They do not seek permission. They seek validation. The real cost is not only the one moment. What they take is not just your time, privacy, or comfort. What they really take is the expectation that you will be consulted before they act. Every time you respond with forgiveness, you teach them that stepping over your line first and asking later is acceptable. Next time they go further, then further again. Not because they are confused, but because your answer trained them. Many people call this maturity. They tell themselves they are keeping peace. But peace built on silent resentment is not peace. It is delayed conflict stored inside you while the other person grows more comfortable with your silence. The loss feels small only because it is spread over time. One moment rarely feels fatal. A repeated pattern does. The response does not need to be emotional. It does not need to be long. It only needs to be clear. I wanted to be asked first. I'm not okay with how that was handled. Next time, ask me before deciding something that affects me. Short, clear. That is the difference between politeness and surrender. Remember its name, retroactive permission. It is not consent. It is pressure packaged as courtesy. You were not consulted. You were informed. Once you learn to hear that trap, you begin to notice something darker. Some questions do not arrive after the act. They arrive before the blow. They do not ask for approval after the damage. They ask you to lower your guard before it begins. That is where the second question waits. Many notice later. Watch closely. The second question sounds clean. It sounds mature. Can I be honest with you? Few phrases wear a better disguise. It enters the room with the posture of respect, as if truth is about to be offered, as if the other person is giving you a choice. But that is not honesty. It is often a request for permission to wound you while still protecting the speaker's image as sincere. The mechanism is simple. They know what they are about to say may be discouraging, dismissive, insulting, or cruel. They know you might resist it if it arrived directly. So first they ask for agreement, a nod, a verbal opening, a sign that your defenses are lowered. And because nobody wants to look fragile, insecure, or allergic to truth, most people say yes before they even know what they are allowing in. That is the trick. The moment you agree, the speaker gains a shield. If their words cut too deeply and you react, they can retreat behind innocence. I was only being honest. You said you wanted the truth. I thought you could handle it. Suddenly, the focus moves away from what was said and onto your reaction to it. They do not merely throw doubt at you, they make you feel guilty for bleeding. They strike first, then try to make your pain look like weakness. You have seen this in real life. A colleague says, "Can I be honest? I don't think you're ready for that role." A relative says, "Let me be honest. Your plan sounds unrealistic." A partner says, "If I'm honest, you've changed in ways I don't respect." A friend says, "I'm just telling the truth because I care, but I think you're embarrassing yourself." These statements are not automatically false. That is what makes them harder to resist. A weapon does not need to be a lie in order to function like one. The real damage is not the sentence itself. The real damage is the seed it leaves behind. After the conversation ends, the mind returns to it. Maybe they were right. Maybe I am not enough. Maybe I looked foolish. Maybe I aimed too high. That is how one sentence occupies mental space far beyond its length. It keeps working after the speaker is gone because they did not only offer an opinion, they installed uncertainty. And if you push back too quickly, you walk into the second layer of the trap. You become the person who cannot take honesty, the person who prefers comfort over truth, the person who needs lies to feel stable. Many people would rather absorb an unfair statement than risk that identity, so they remain composed on the outside and carry the bruise inward. A cleaner response is possible. You do not have to become defensive. You do not have to perform gratitude for a wound you never requested. You can say, "That depends on what you mean." You can say, "Go ahead, and I'll decide what is useful." You can say, "If this is feedback, be specific." These replies keep your judgment active. They refuse the idea that honesty automatically equals value. They do not reject truth. They reject the attempt to smuggle harm inside moral language, because genuinely helpful people rarely need ceremony before speaking with care. They do not need a dramatic preface to excuse impact. People who want to help usually focus on clarity, not on preserving their self-image as brave truth-tellers. The ones who ask for permission too carefully are often managing your reaction before they deliver their message. They are not concerned with truth, they are concerned with freedom from consequence. Call the trap what it is: disguised honesty. It is not truth at its cleanest. It is aggression wearing ethical language. It sounds like courage, but often functions like cover. And once you learn to hear it, a third pattern becomes easier to see. Some questions do not seek your vulnerability or your self-doubt. They seek something heavier. They seek your name attached to a choice whose consequences you will not control. That is where the third question begins. Listen closely the next time someone frames harshness as courage. Notice how often the request comes before the content, not after. That order matters. It tells you the speaker is preparing the ground before striking. They are trying to control the meaning of your reaction before your reaction even exists. The line may last only seconds, but its effects can remain for weeks. The mind replays what entered softly and stayed painfully. That is why this question works so well. It recruits your desire to seem strong, reasonable, and mature, then uses that desire to make you stand still while your confidence is cut open. The third question is more flattering than the first two. That is why people rarely recognize the trap in time. It sounds like respect. It sounds like trust. It sounds like someone placing weight on your judgment. If you were me, what would you do? The ego enjoys this question immediately. It creates the feeling that your mind is valuable, that your perception is solid enough to guide someone else through uncertainty. But that feeling is exactly what makes the trap effective. Because this is not always a request for insight. Sometimes it is a transfer of burden, a quiet attempt to move part of the emotional weight, risk, or future blame onto your shoulders. The person asking still owns the decision in name, but the gravity of it begins shifting toward you. And the danger is simple. You may help shape a choice whose consequences you will never control, yet your fingerprints can remain on it long after the outcome turns bad. The mechanism depends on one hunger in human nature, the hunger to feel significant. Being consulted makes people feel chosen. Being asked for guidance makes them feel wise, useful, and needed. That sensation is warm. It clouds judgment quickly. You forget that this is not your life, not your money, not your marriage, not your resignation, not your risk. But once your advice enters the decision, your distance from the consequences becomes strangely irrelevant. Think about the common versions. Someone asks if they should leave their job. Someone asks if they should marry, break up, reconcile, invest, expose a secret, confront a boss, move cities, or return to someone who already hurt them. The questions are rarely small. They carry fear, hope, pride, shame, uncertainty. That is why your answer feels meaningful, but meaningful is not the same as safe. And here is the asymmetry people ignore. If the choice works, they experience it as their courage. If it fails, your role becomes easier to remember. Not always openly, not always maliciously, but often enough. You told me to do it. You said this was the better path. I only took that step because of what you said. Even if they later simplify your advice, even if they leave out their own motives, your voice remains inside the story of the mistake. That is why this trap appears so often. The asker wants relief from the loneliness of choosing, and your answer can feel like a bridge across that discomfort. But bridges carry weight. Once you step under someone else's load, you are no longer only advising. You are stabilizing a future you do not control. This does not mean you should never help. It means you should refuse false ownership. Instead of stepping into the decision for them, keep them inside it. Ask, what are you already leaning toward? Ask, what part of this feels hardest for you? Ask, which outcome are you actually prepared to live with? Or say, I can help you think it through, but the decision has to stay yours. That response does something powerful. It offers clarity without accepting borrowed liability. Because many people do not want guidance as much as they want relief. They want relief from choosing. And if you are not careful, you become that escape. You carry the tension they should be carrying. You spend more emotional energy on their future than they do. That is not wisdom. It is misplaced responsibility. Support is not the same as ownership. If you have ever watched someone return to blame the advice they begged for, you already know this pattern. Remember it the next time a heavy choice is offered to you in the language of admiration. Not every request for perspective is manipulation, but every serious decision must return to the person who will live inside its consequences. Your answer should help them see more clearly, not help them hand you the weight of their life. Give the trap its name, transferred decision. It sounds like trust, but often functions like outsourced responsibility. And once that becomes clear, the fourth question grows sharper. Because now the threat is not only your boundary, your confidence, or your name. Now the target becomes the source of truth itself. That is where the fourth question waits. Real reflection seeks clarity. Avoidance seeks endorsement. The question sounds the same, but the motive is different. Once you learn that difference, you stop confusing usefulness with surrender. You stop placing your name on burdens that were never yours. And that shift matters, because the people most willing to borrow your judgment are often the same ones who later borrow your silence. Advice can become evidence against you. Remember that. The fourth question sounds simple. Who told you that? Where did you hear that? Who said it? On the surface, it sounds like a search for facts, but in many tense conversations, that is not what it is doing. It is not seeking truth. It is hunting the source. And the moment you answer too quickly, the entire direction of the conversation changes. Watch the pattern carefully. You confront someone with something uncomfortable, a lie, a betrayal, a hidden conversation, a move they hoped would remain unseen. Instead of addressing what they did, they pivot. They do not begin with explanation. They begin with origin. Who told you? How do you know? Where did that come from? That pivot is not innocent. It is strategic. The focus moves away from their action and toward your access, away from substance and toward exposure, away from guilt and toward the map of how guilt became visible. That is why this trap is darker than it first appears. If you answer, you may not only weaken yourself, you may also endanger someone who trusted you enough to speak. The source becomes the next target. The mirror gets blamed for the face it reflected. And once that happens, truth becomes harder to reach the next time, because people learn that telling you something carries risk. This happens everywhere. In families, when a relative is confronted about gossip and wants the name of the person who revealed it. At work, when someone is called out for a hidden move and their first instinct is not correction, but containment. In friendships, when dishonesty gets exposed and the conversation turns into an investigation of loyalty instead of behavior. In relationships, when a lie is uncovered and the liar becomes obsessed with how the lie was discovered rather than why it was told. The psychological move is brilliant in its cruelty. It turns the one who confronts into the one now under pressure. Instead of standing inside your question, you find yourself defending your method, your access, your source, your right to know. Their discomfort becomes your responsibility to manage. And because many people hate conflict, they answer to keep the conversation moving. But that answer often gives away the one thing that still had protection. The response must be disciplined. That is not the point. Is it true? We are talking about what happened, not who mentioned it. Answer the content. Short, cold, precise. You are not refusing truth. You are refusing diversion. There is a difference. Once you protect the source, the other person is forced back toward the thing they wanted to escape. Name the trap clearly. Source hunting. The point is not understanding. The point is shutting the line that carried the truth. People miss this because the question sounds administrative. It sounds neutral. It sounds like the person is simply organizing facts. But neutral language can carry intent. A calm voice can still be trying to close every exit around the truth. The smartest manipulators do not always deny first. They identify the witness, isolate the channel, and make future exposure more expensive for everyone watching. That is why answering carelessly can damage more than one conversation. It can teach an entire system that honesty is unsafe and silence is rewarded. It can tell future witnesses that bringing truth to you may cost them. And the next time something ugly happens behind your back, no one says anything, not because nothing was seen, but because they remember what happened to the last person who spoke. If the first 4 questions seem different, notice what they share underneath. 1 asks for approval after the boundary is crossed. 1 asks for permission before delivering a wound. 1 asks you to help carry a decision that is not yours. 1 asks you to expose the path truth traveled. Different language, same ambition. Each one tries to shorten the pause between hearing and answering. That pause matters more than most people realize. Because power does not disappear only in dramatic moments. It often disappears in reflex, in social pressure, in the fear of seeming difficult, weak, selfish, closed, or disloyal. The trap succeeds when you respond before you observe what the question is trying to take. That is why the 5th question matters most. It explains why the other 4 work so well. It softens the ground beneath all of them. It makes people surrender before any specific trap even arrives. A person interested in repair usually wants to discuss the act itself. A person interested in preserving control wants to locate the leak. That distinction will protect you better than clever language. Once you recognize it, you stop confusing curiosity with accountability. You stop handing the truth back to the person most motivated to bury it. Keep it. The 5th question is the softest of them all. That is why it is the most dangerous. You trust me, don't you? You trust me, right? What? You don't trust me? It sounds emotional, almost intimate. It sounds like reassurance is being requested. It sounds like a relationship is being protected. But that is not what this question is asking for. It is not asking for trust. It is asking for exemption. This is the master trap because one quick yes can lock you into silence long after the moment passes. The person asking does not simply want confidence. They want reduced scrutiny. They want to lower the cost of future inconsistency. They want your loyalty declared before behavior is tested. In effect, they are asking you to sign a blank check in advance, one that can later be used against your own perception. The psychology behind it is ruthless because it leans on a moral pressure most people can barely resist. Saying no feels harsh, suspicious, even cruel. It sounds like you are damaging the relationship, doubting a friend, insulting a partner, or rejecting someone's sincerity. So people answer yes to preserve harmony. They say yes because they want to seem warm. They say yes because they do not want to become the cold one in the room. And that one word becomes a chain. Because once you have declared trust, every later question becomes harder to resist. If they act first and ask later, you hesitate to object because trusted people should not be treated with suspicion. If they ask to be honest and then cut you with that honesty, you feel pressure to receive it quietly because trust should tolerate discomfort. If they shift a painful decision toward you, you carry it because trust feels like support. If they hunt the source of an ugly truth, you feel disloyal withholding it because trust should be open. The first 4 traps survive because this one softens the ground beneath them. That is why real trust never needs to be demanded in a sentence. It is demonstrated over time in patterns, in consistency, in what a person does when reassurance is not being requested. The more someone pushes for verbal declarations of trust, the more carefully you should return your attention to behavior. People who are truly trustworthy do not need emotional signatures every time accountability gets close. Their actions do the work without asking your mouth to do it for them. A steadier response exists. I pay attention to actions. Trust is built by what people do. I watch patterns, not promises. These replies are not hostile. They are grounded. They refuse the false choice between warmth and awareness. You do not have to become hard to become difficult to manipulate. You only need to stop granting innocence before evidence has earned it. Now, step back and look at all 5 questions together. One asks you to bless a boundary that was already crossed. One asks permission to strike under the banner of honesty. One asks you to carry the pressure of someone else's decision. One asks you to reveal the path by which truth reached you. And this final one asks for your trust before the next move even happens. Different masks, same mechanism. Each trap tries to kill the pause. Each one turns your reflex into the other person's advantage. Each one hopes you will answer before asking the only question that matters. What is this trying to take from me? From this point on, you will hear these questions differently. You will notice when politeness is being used to rush consent. You will notice when honesty is being used to avoid responsibility. You will notice when admiration is being used to hand you a burden, when curiosity is being used to smoke out a source, and when trust is being used as a shield against scrutiny. If too many old conversations are suddenly making sense, keep one line with you. I keep my answer until I understand the question. Most people do not lose power because they are overpowered. They lose it because they answer too quickly, too politely, and too predictably. Not every question deserves your truth. Not every tone deserves your openness. The highest skill in conversation is not always knowing what to say. Sometimes it is knowing what should not be answered on reflex. If this changed the way you hear conversation, write this: I guard my answers. If it changed the way you think about trust, write this: I watch actions, not promises. And if you are done giving away power through politeness, stay for the next video. Once you hear the question behind the question, you do not return to the old way of speaking. Your power lives in the pause. Protect it.